Yes, another thing that I learned was that there was a cluster of leukemia cases in Woburn, in our watershed. And I looked at the maps, and I knew that the Massachusetts Department of Public Health had looked at this. Not only that, they had referred this leukemia cluster to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control. The CDC and the State Department of Public Health concluded that there was no causality there, that you couldn't distinguish this cluster, spatio-temporal cluster of leukemia cases from chance, because leukemia happens, and it can happen that some of them are, near each other in time and space in a given time. And so they basically had this negative report. I looked at the maps, and it looked to me like the cases, the homes of the children with leukemia were clustered in a very narrow area around a couple of wells that were providing well water for Woburn. And I didn't know much more about it, but it just piqued my curiosity. So I organized a symposium, a presentation at the Harvard School of Public Health, my institution, with the Department of Biostatistics. And that was a very fruitful thing, because the head of the Department of Biostatistics was a very imaginative man named Marvin Zellen. And Marvin looked at these maps, and he heard about the cases, and when the presentation was over, he said, I have another idea about how to study this. There may be something to this. And he said, I would study it in a different way. He said, we could look at this in a different way, because I know something about wells. When you have wells supplying water to people in homes, they don't get all of their water from the well water. They get some of the well water, some of their water in their faucet from the wells, and some of it from the public water supply. It's a mixture. But, he said, the further away you get from the wells, the less well water you have, and the more public water you have. He said, so let's do something which we do regularly. We'll look and see if there's a dose-response curve. And the dose-response curve that we'll study is this. We'll look at all the homes, not just the leukemia homes, but we'll look at all the homes, and we'll see if there's a relationship between proximity to the wells and the probability of leukemia, because they'll get a higher dose in their water the closer they are. That study turned out to be significantly positive. And it had a profound effect on the case. The effect it had was this. There was a lawyer, Jan Schlichtman, who had been fighting Beatrice Chemical and Grace Chemical about the wells, about the leukemia cases. He had exhausted all the money in his firm. All of his colleagues were fed up with this, and actually Jan, at that point, had quit. He'd thrown up his hands, basically had exhausted the funds in his firm. But he found out about this study. He found out about this study, and he decided, this is like a smoking gun. I'm going to go back into this case. And he resumed his activity. Then there was another irony. He actually presented the study to the judge, federal judge Skinner. And Skinner said, we can't use that. This is about probabilities. Said, we want facts in legal cases, and probabilities don't matter. It's either a fact or it's not a fact. Don't tell me about probabilities. And he essentially threw this study, which became a published study, out. But Schlichtman had resumed his activity, and at that point, something else happened which blew the case open, and that was there was a whistleblower. The whistleblower went to he went to the homes of one of the families where a child had died of leukemia, and he was really guilt-stricken. And he said, you know, he said at the end of the day when we were finishing up our work at this little plant that we had up there in Woburn, we would take the barrels of chemicals and we would just spill them out on the ground. Well, it happened that this was right next to the wells, and even though the wells went down 80 feet, it was just sand and gravel, and anything that you spilled would go right down there into the aquifer and be picked up in the well water. So that whistleblowing actually is what upset the case. That's what finally brought about the admissions by Grace Chemical. I believe it was a settlement rather than a jury decision. They settled the case.